Kia ora, and welcome to another video celebrating World Breastfeeding Week 2020. This is intended as a platform to share diverse experiences and information, and we hope that you find this series supportive and informative. It is important to note that these are personal stories and opinions and do not necessarily reflect the views of Women's Health Action or our funders. Please seek advice from your health professional before making any important decisions about infant or young child feeding.
Kia ora, just a quick note before we start this video to let you know that we had some technical issues while filming this clip, and that has resulted in filming in two parts, so you might notice a bit of a change towards the end and some variances in sound. So hope you stick with us and enjoy. Thank you. Kia ora, and welcome to another World Breastfeeding Week video. Today I'm really excited to be joined by another amazing mama, Kendall Green, to chat about her breastfeeding journeys. Kendall is passionate about women's health and breastfeeding and has had long and complex journeys herself. She hopes to empower other women to make informed choices that feel right to them and their whānau. So welcome, Kendall, and thank you so much for joining me. I thought we could start off by you telling us just a little bit about yourself and your whānau.
So I'm a mother to two daughters, Lola, who's 4, and Cleo, who is 2, and we live in Christchurch, New Zealand.
Cool.
And I'm just going to study my background's in law, but I'm going into midwifery, hopefully.
Oh, busy person, wow. So I guess, like we've chatted about, your journey with breastfeeding has certainly not been a straightforward one, and I thought maybe you could just run us through about your experiences, what helped and hindered you along the way, and I guess, yeah, the things that you held going into your first pregnancy and birth, and then how that shifted leading into your second, and things that you might have done differently if you'd known what you know now.
So I always knew that breastfeeding was really important to me. And I wanted to breastfeed. My own mother breastfed all 3 of us and my sister until she was almost 3, I think. So, and my midwife was really supportive and a really supportive practice around breastfeeding. So I kind of felt like it was all going to just be quite easy, which, and I'm sure you're really familiar with that feeling. But so within, a couple of days of my first daughter being born, I started to intuitively feel that there was something wrong, and I potentially had a supply issue because she just seemed really grumpy and unsettled. And so we weighed her. Because I was a first-time mum, and I know that it is really normal for that cluster feeding to happen in those first few days, and it's really normal for that second night to be really horrendous. So the midwife that I was talking to, my own midwife, was off over the weekend, but she was telling me that it was normal, but, to keep an eye on it. But by about day 5, I said to my midwife, no, I don't think it is normal. And she was in agreement. So we weighed Lola, and she'd lost 10% of her body weight. And so then the recommendation is that you are referred into pediatrics to make sure everything's okay with baby. And so we did that.
And day 5, was it, or first week?
Day 5.
Yeah.
So normally you weigh on day 7. But we weren't really comfortable waiting until then. So we went into Christchurch hospital, and at that point we'd already introduced a little bit of donor milk. When we weighed her, my midwife said, okay, now we're going to need to get a pump and see what's happening, and you're going to have to give her something. And she said something really beautiful, actually, and she said to me, you can just, because she knew that breastfeeding was really important to me, so that was the page that we were staying on together. We weren't talking about other options at that point.
Sure.
So she said to me, you can think of the donor milk as kind of natural medicine, which I and it made it feel really good.
Yeah. Hey, and so I was just wondering, other than the weight gain and the sort of general fussiness and grumpiness of your baby, were there any other signs? I know that a lot of the time people focus quite a lot on the output of the baby, so how many wet nappies, how many dirty nappies, and that can be something that I've heard that can create a bit of a clouded picture for someone. Sometimes the output is good, but there's still clearly an issue going on. Was there any of that came up for you, or it was those main sort of markers of the weight gain and behaviour and your intuition, obviously?
Yeah, her output was actually okay, and it's really hard to measure with tiny, because it's like disposable nappies these days are so absorbent. And so,
that's so true.
Yeah, and so I have heard a trick whereby you actually fold a tissue or some toilet paper and put it inside their nappy, because then you are going to really be able to see.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They have told me that then, actually. But no, her output was okay, but she was a bit jaundiced.
Okay, yeah.
Moving through.
Yeah.
Which can also be normal as well. So
yeah. But it's those things of painting a story, isn't it? Sort of putting things together and getting a bigger picture. It's a few different things. It's good your midwife was onto it.
Super onto it, yes.
Yeah. So sorry about that. So you're at the paediatrics.
So yeah, we started, and that was fine, because I had started to feel, I think when anything like that happens with your baby, you do start to feel a bit worried. Despite the fact that I didn't really want to be in hospital, I also really wanted to know that she was okay. And that was a really supportive environment. So I had lots of really lovely nurses who were just really keen to take care of us. And I think it was quite novel for them to have such a tiny baby, and they were all keen to like rock her for me, and they were, getting us really nice snacks, and they were honestly lovely. I wrote them a letter afterwards. They were nice. So kind. I suppose where it was hard was that I was getting a lot of different advice. A lot of those nurses had breastfed themselves, I think all of them. And there was about 4 of them kind of coming and going. And then we had an obstetrician. And there was even a point where, a pediatrician, sorry. There was even a point where one of the nurses was talking to me about what she thought I needed to do, which I think was to switch feed. And then the pediatrician was actually saying to the nurse, no, that's not what she should be doing. She needs to keep the baby at the breast. So they were even having a discussion between themselves about their. And then I also had my midwife's advice, and then my mum's advice, and then there was like a lot of different kind of things happening.
And your internal sort of dialogue going on at the same time.
Yeah, so I think that was probably not helpful, because I kind of ended up not being able to follow any of the advice, because I got so kind of overwhelmed with all of it that I just.
Yeah, it would have been so much better if they could have worked together as a team, had a bit of a briefing and said, right, what's our plan of attack here? How are we going to deal with this and keep it consistent?
Yeah, and so I do remember asking to speak to the lactation consultant at the hospital. I thought maybe if I just talk to her, I can drown out all the background noise and just, not that anyone was wrong. All of the advice they were giving was good advice. It was just all different ways of doing things. And she was too busy, so that didn't end up happening. But we discharged home the next morning, and I had a really good feeding plan in place with my midwife anyway.
Okay. It's concerning. It's not the first time that I've heard that someone's been admitted into a postnatal ward for issues with feeding and not been able to see the feeding specialist, as it were, the lactation consultant. And I guess they're really busy, but that's something that does concern me a bit, is that building picture of, you'd think if anyone was going to see them, it would be someone who was actually admitted for those issues. Sorry to interrupt there. So you're back at home, you've got a good plan with your midwife?
A good plan. And we then saw a lactation consultant in the community. So
did you have to pay for that, or was that part of your sort of postnatal wraparound care?
No, that was not. I didn't have to pay anything for it.
Okay, Cool.
Yeah, but that wasn't, to be completely honest, an overly helpful experience either.
Okay.
Yeah, I think when there are supply issues, it seems to me that that's a really big unknown, even with breastfeeding experts or lactation consultants, or it's just nobody really knows much. So it's kind of easy to...
There's just so many factors at play, isn't there? There's so many different reasons. Each individual baby, each individual mum, each individual set of breasts, it's really like who knows what's going on. But yeah, it's certainly, it all builds into that picture of that consistency of advice and what you think, trying to nail down some sort of plan.
Yeah. So at that time, I think I was triple feeding, which you might be familiar with as well.
So the triple feeding, do you want to tell people what that involves for people who aren't familiar with that fun protocol?
So completely unsustainable, and I don't think anybody should actually do it, to be honest. I don't think it's helpful mentally, and I don't actually know that it's helpful for supply either. But anyway, so you feed your baby at the breast, and then you top your baby up however you're doing that, bottle or supplementary nursing system or cup feeding, whatever you're doing at that point. And then you pump. And I think it's recommended at least 15 minutes on each side.
Yeah.
And so as everyone who's had a new baby will know, at about that point, your baby wants to be fed again, because you've kind of, if you've done that and had a snack and, you know, answered a couple of text messages, then you've kind of hit the mark.
Yeah.
And time up. And so I was doing that, which I was finding just excruciating. And pumping is quite unhelpful, I think, when you've got supply issues as well, because you kind of get really focused on how much you're able to pump, and you kind of sit there panicking about it, or at least I did.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you on that. I used to have the same issue. I had a long journey with pumping, and I really hated my pump.
Yes.
Towards the end, I resented that pump and the amount of work that went into getting so little milk. But and it's so different for each individual person. I remember sitting next to a woman one time who pumped in our office, and she came in, and 10 minutes later she had these 2 full bottles of milk, and I thought, wow, that's such a stark contrast to my experience. I do think it's really interesting to note that even women with amazing supplies can not go down to a pump, or you know, it's such an individual thing, and we probably do need to make more out of the sort of point that how much you're able to express is not necessarily indicative of your milk supply, right? But obviously in your case it was just part of a bigger picture.
Yeah, part of a bigger picture. But I do really resonate with that feeling of somebody else just be able to express so much.
Absolutely. Now with your the top ups or supplementing, did your midwife or lactation consultant like help you to provide information about how much extra milk your baby needed, or did you just sort of follow your own cues there in terms of how much you were topping up?
With Lola, I was told, and I can't remember now what it was, but somebody, I think it was in the hospital, they said to me, we want you to give her, 20 ml or something along those lines.
Sure.
And so that's what I was doing, and I was initially doing it with a hospital-made supplementary nursing system, so a nasogastric tube and a little urine sample bottle.
Oh, yeah.
Which is...
I had a wee syringe.
Oh, yeah?
Or a big syringe. It was like a big syringe with a little, the tube at the end, and sort of drew the milk up into the syringe, and that's how we used ours. They all seem to have different little things that they have their technique.
You were also feeding with a supply line with
the
syringe.
It was like one of those big gauge syringes. I think it was about this big. sort of worked. Definitely not, it wasn't a sustainable thing for us, but I talked to another mum last week who continued to use the SNS for a year. So it's all down to individuals, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Anyway, we'll continue on. So you were using your SNS and your pumping and did your midwife ever talk to you about anything like taking prescription medicine like domperidone or anything like that? Were you doing anything in that variety?
Yes, I took domperidone with my first baby, and I don't think my midwife recommended it. I think she said that I should go and see my GP.
Yeah.
The College of Midwives in New Zealand does recommend it because it's
yeah.
So,
sure.
But I mean, obviously, if you want to get it, then your GP, after they ask you some questions, like
sure.
Heart things and stuff like that. But so I did. I took it for, I can't remember how long it was. It was potentially about 3 months. But and it's something that I've heard from another woman that she had a quite bad experience with it too. But when I came off of it, because it's actually a dopamine agonist, which a lot of people don't know, and so I'm pretty upbeat. Like I had, good mental health at this point, and I'm usually pretty resilient and okay. But I felt really, really flat when I came off it for probably 2 or 3 weeks. Really,
interesting.
Really not like myself at all. Just didn't want to kind of do anything, or so I thought that was really interesting.
And yeah, it's not something that was ever discussed with me, but interesting to think about, because I am aware of the sort of, I guess, the background of the drug, and that's obviously an important thing to probably discuss.
Yeah, and I don't know that my GP never mentioned to me that could happen. He didn't actually mention that it was a dopamine agonist. So that was just really just a personal experience, I guess.
Sure.
I've spoken to another mum locally who had like a severe depressive episode when she came off of it. So
wow,
worth thinking about.
Absolutely.
But so we ended up just using a bottle because, as you know, the trickle feeding and the SNS and all of that just got too much, and so she ended up being topped up with a bottle, and she carried on having that until she was about 10 months old.
And did you have any problems switching from bottle to breast with your baby? Yeah, mine. I know there are people that do. It's something that's often talked about, but we never had an issue ourselves either around the sort of.
If you stopped if you stopped breastfeeding for a couple of weeks and they were kind of over that 4-month mark where they're quite awake.
Yeah.
I think then if you tried to get them back to the breast or something, they would wonder what was going on. But I think if you're really consistent and you are doing consistently, I mean, they're happy to have milk, aren't they? So I mean,
that's right.
Problem, no.
Yeah. So how long did that sort of how long did you continue to breastfeed and supplement?
So I breastfed her until she was about 1, but I supplemented her until she was eating well, which she was kind of a later eater. So I followed some really good guidelines on Kelly Mum, which I don't know if you know about Kelly Mum.
Oh yeah, it's such a great resource. And you mentioned that you were using donor milk. How did you go about getting donor milk?
So I went through human milk for human babies.
Okay.
And there was a woman, and she was Dunedin based, and she was at exactly the same time that I started looking for donor milk for Lola. She was saying, I've got this little boy, and he was about a month older than Lola, and she had a massive oversupply.
Wow.
And she was saying, who can I donate to? I'd like to donate on an ongoing basis. And I think she had about 15 requests. And anyway, her and I got talking, and she said, no, I'm really happy to donate to you, which was quite a big deal because she had to package her milk up every week in a polystyrene box and, you know, put ice around it and get it to the post office at 4 o'clock so that it, you know, went on the last kind of courier of the day. And I just used to pay for her courier fees. And then we kind of just became really quite good friends, and we are still in touch now, and we call our children milk siblings. And yeah, it was a really lovely experience actually. So
and did someone point you to this, the human milk for human babies, or you sort of had heard about it before? And was what sort of process was there involved in like connecting up and learning about your donor milk mama?
So I can't remember how I got onto human milk for human babies. It was probably through my midwife. She suggested a whole and then I did start obsessively researching. You know, as soon as I had supply issues, I was out there finding out all of the information I could. So I was pretty well informed by that point. And she got blood screened, so we kind of went the really traditional safe route initially. He had the blood tests, and we talked lifestyle questions. So I wasn't on medication, so I didn't want anyone to be on any medication, because then you're introducing another kind of risk, I guess. And yeah, she was just really transparent, and you get a feeling for people pretty quickly, and she's just a really person. So
And how long did she supply milk to you and Lola, is it?
Yeah, I think it was about 7 months. It was a really long
wow. Yeah.
More than that. It was a long time. So and she came to Christchurch, and we met and had all of our children together. And
nice. That's awesome. And is there anything else you wanted to say about that sort of first journey, or do you want to sort of talk about how things went with, is it Cleo? Yeah.
No, probably nothing beyond. I think it's really helpful if you're really confused and you're getting a lot of different advice. I think maybe to just find one person who you can really trust, your midwife or a consultant or a peer counsellor or whoever it is, and maybe try and follow through with them a little bit, because I think you can get quite overwhelmed, and then you start Googling, of course, and then it can all go really dramatically wrong.
Sure. Yeah, that's really good advice. So when you found out you were pregnant with Cleo and going through that pregnancy, were you thinking or anxious about your breastfeeding journey to come, or did you do anything different to sort of try and help prepare for that? Did you have the same midwife, or did you work with her or with them? Yes, sort of in the lead up to having baby.
Yeah, so I did start to feel, because I was really at peace with everything that happened with Lola, and it was fine for me. I didn't have any kind of regrets or anything. But then I did start to suddenly, about halfway through my pregnancy, feel like it was going to be really hard if I couldn't breastfeed exclusively. But at the same time, I was pretty keen to protect my mental health, and you know, it's really different when you have a second baby. You just don't have that time.
Yeah.
So I had a different midwife, but still really supportive of breastfeeding. And I said to her, you know, I'm not going to pump for any reason at any point. That's just not going to be part of this journey for me, regardless of what happens.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to take domperidone.
Yeah.
Things were just off the cards. And she was absolutely fine with that. I saw a lactation consultant antenatally, and that was actually quite good, just to kind of talk through some issues. And she recommended a whole lot of herbs, which I had also kind of found out about in the course of my research. And I actually think one of them really helped me. So that's different things help different people, but totally there's a herb called goat's rue. It's used, it was discovered, they used it for cows in Europe, And so when cows eat this plant, their milk supply increases.
Oh, wow.
And it's something to do with the prolactin receptors. But
Yeah.
I really noticed a change when I started taking it. So I took that, and
that was that was antenatally, so before baby, or?
No, it's not recommended to start taking it before baby because
Okay.
and then effect.
Sure.
You don't want if you're kind of at risk of hemorrhage or anything like that. So
yeah.
I think maybe 3 weeks after she was born, I wanted to see how things went.
And were your births straightforward? Did you have skin to skin afterwards? Did you have, you know, how was that sort of those first, just sorry to track back a moment, but yeah, did you feel like there was anything in that part of the picture? Did you do anything like as a colostrum harvesting or whatever they call it these days? Antenatal expression?
Yeah, so straightforward births, both just vaginal deliveries,
yeah,
fast labours,
yeah,
skin to skin immediately afterwards, happy babies, like
yeah,
everything. All the boxes were ticked in that.
yeah.
And I did express colostrum antenatally both times, only a tiny bit the first time because I think I started 2 days before she actually was born.
Sure.
The second time I started at 37 weeks on the advice of the lactation consultant, and she was born at 38 and 4, but I'd managed to then, so that was good. But again, really, really straightforward birth. Like it just, couldn't have been any more straightforward, I don't think. So I don't think there was anything any of that which contributed to any of the issues.
Sure.
But yeah, I do think seeing a lactation consultant antenatally if you've had breastfeeding issues the first time is quite helpful, even just as a sounding board. Talk about how you feel about it, and you know what might happen going forward, and how
absolutely, yeah.
What you and I were talking about before you started recording, you know, about breastfeeding success. The lactation consultant that I saw antenatally said the same thing to me that we were talking about, which is that success is really personally defined, and what might look like success for one woman is having a full supply and everything being really straightforward and easy, and for another woman it might be the fact that they still feed their baby once a day until they're 2 years old.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
As long as it's coming from you and it's how you've decided, whatever you decide success is.
Yeah,
and I found that a really nice thing to hear.
It's such a good point, because we can be so hard on ourselves. Yeah, and it is such a good point. I remember talking to my mama once, actually at a big latch-on event, and she was just overcome with joy, and she had just managed to latch her baby on for 1 whole minute, and it was just an incredibly beautiful and satisfying moment for her. And it really struck me at that point that our journeys cannot be defined as successes or failures when you're looking at that level of diversity and experiences and journeys and complexity. That those wonderful moments, they happen in a journey and in so many different ways for different individuals, that we really need to be thinking about that as we go throughout our interactions with each other, and something that health professionals definitely need to be thinking about in terms of the way that they speak to women, especially someone who's already experienced an issue. I know when I was pregnant with my second baby, I was like, I'm going to get it working this time. I'm really going to make it happen, and we're not going to have these issues. And for us, that wasn't the case. So I'm thinking, as you're going into your second story, did you have a similar pattern with Cleo as you did for Lola?
Yes, similar pattern. But I was really, really upset about it the second time. So and much more upset than I thought I would be, and
sure,
realized at the time.
So, and was that again the similar thing where you sort of started to notice those behaviours in the baby, and then did you go for the weighing with all your hopes going, I think it's really, we're getting there, and then have that same sort of weight loss and the acceptance that you've got to start looking at getting more milk in that baby? Or
well, she was a different baby, so she was really sleepy. She wasn't cross with me. She was just
okay,
she just wanted to be asleep all the time. But she was a little bit earlier as well. So and you know, just 3 kilos. So I guess the sleepiness was quite normal in a way.
yep,
But I definitely had the gut feeling again, just absolutely searing through me at every moment of the day.
sure.
On paper, it all looked fine. Again, she had good output, and I seemed to be having quite good letdowns, and she was, you know, feeding pretty well. But it was just that gut feeling.
And did you have the same midwife, or?
Different midwife, but she was really supportive, and she was really listening to me.
Okay, great.
But it did look fine. So she was saying, you know, I think it's fine.
Okay.
You obviously don't, so that's valid.
Yeah.
And so we weighed her again on day 5, and again, yeah, the same 10% weight loss, and that was a really hard moment. Like
Yeah.
That was pretty bad.
Yeah.
I feel guilty.
Yeah, I can really understand that. I remember with my 3rd baby, just going into the midwife's clinic, and I had the first ever time in my 3 babies I had worn a breast pad because I was leaking some milk. It never happened before, and now I know that that's not an indication of whether, I know it's not an indication of a supply or whatever, but I was like, hey, I've really got it going. I've done all these things. I've learned everything, and we you know, I've got this leaking breast, and I'm a milk machine. And we went in and then had the weigh, and the midwife was like, oh, you know, I'm so sorry, but we're just not seeing what we need to see. And yeah, it's that there can, you know, as much as you can feel like you're in control of your journey, you're defining your success, you know this is a road well traveled, it can still feel hard because you know what's to come, you know this journey. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So really, yeah, not good moment. And luckily one of my best friends was coming over immediately following that appointment, and she was just amazing. And she sat me on the sofa and brought me all these snacks, and she was just really, she just didn't really do much of anything apart from just listen and just
Sure.
and you must be feeling really upset, and
yeah,
validating. She didn't say to me, oh, don't worry, or oh, you can just do this, or, you know, I'm sure it's going to be okay. She just totally accepted how I was feeling about it and just let it be.
Because we have that tendency, don't we, to sort of almost sort of, you want to fix something for someone. And in breastfeeding or in birth alike, I think sometimes there is a tendency to, especially within peers, to be like, oh, look, it doesn't matter, it's fine, you know. Not a term that I particularly enjoy, but, you know, fed is best and it's all okay. It's just, you know, whatever, it's all the same. And really sort of, I feel like, although, you know, that might be what people think that you want to hear, for a lot of people that can feel really dismissing of the things that were important to them or the journey that they'd hoped to have. And you can sort of have acceptance and understand at the same time as grieving what you were hoping for, at the same time as feeling thankful that you have other valid options. It's such a complicated space, but I think I really hear what you're saying there. Having someone who can just listen and validate your feelings rather than trying to fix it or to dismiss the way you're feeling is definitely the way to go, at least in my experience. And it sounds like for you, it's, you know, I think we need to avoid that compulsion to say it doesn't matter, because it does.
Yeah, yes, I really agree. I think that's actually one of the most important things that people can do. And my partner was doing the pragmatic thing, and I think it is maybe more of a man thing than a woman thing, where he was just saying, well, it's fine because we've got all the options to fix this, so there's nothing to be upset about.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, he was trying to help me as well, and he was trying to move me through my feelings, but which was okay. But I think, yeah, having somebody, you know, if any of your listeners know anyone who is experiencing breastfeeding issues, and I was thinking today about, before we spoke about the way that my second midwife dealt with me, because I think I was probably quite consumed by all of the feeding stuff, and just listened really deeply all the time. And she also didn't really say it's fine or don't worry about it. She was just and listening, and you know, it was probably quite frustrating at times, but I think if you can just really listen deeply to women and kind of just almost reflect back to them what they're saying, you know, I'm hearing what you're saying and you're feeling really upset about that, so, and not try and fix it or take away from it, then I think you'll allow people to get to their own place of fixing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such an important part of your journey, isn't it? Because if you feel like you have some part in the way that your journey moved forward, or that you've had, you've played an active role in the decisions and the way that that, you know, the road that you traveled, it feels like you can reflect on that and feel empowered about the things that you did and didn't do, and the decisions that you made along the way, and having someone come and take that away from you doesn't necessarily help, even though it might feel like it did at the time, like, you know. Yeah. And I get it from partners' perspective. It feels like they see people in, you know, upset and in pain, and they just want to fix it, and they think, well, here we go, here's a fix. Yeah. So from there, did you go back down the donor milk route?
So I went back down the donor milk route, but I was much more prepared. So I had a Medala SNS this time, which is quite good. Again, not ideal, but definitely better than any homemade solution.
Sure, less fiddly and stuff.
Less fiddly and more kind of purpose-built, I guess.
Yeah.
And my partner was really fantastic in that he took full responsibility for that. So he, which I think is a really cool thing for partners.
Awesome.
So he would sterilize it, clean it, do everything with it. All I had to do with it was feed Cleo.
Yeah.
And I just topped her up really intuitively. Obviously, having discussions with my midwife, and we were weighing her and we were watching really carefully, but I just decided that was how I was going to do it.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's definitely sort of in control of your own destiny and the way things move forward.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, you obviously decided not to do the expressing, and not to do the domperidone. Did you and your midwife ever have a discussion about what you thought might have been the cause of your lower milk supply?
No, not really. I don't think there was any obvious cause. So I thought about getting my thyroid tested and doing those kind of things, because obviously, you know, there's kind of links with polycystic ovarian syndrome, and thyroid issues and Hashimoto's and things like that. But I kind of knew that none of that was the case.
So how long did you continue using donor milk this time? And presuming that it was probably a different donor, and did you find them on human milk for human babies as like this time around, or?
So I couldn't actually remember just then. I didn't. Second time around, I was much more successful for myself, and I only used donor milk. I think it was for about 12 weeks.
Okay.
I did it all using so first I used the Medala SNS, which we were talking about, and then I got hold of a Lactate, which is another SNS, but they're made in the States, and you can't actually buy it anywhere here. I got a friend to get it for me who was visiting the States, and I think you can also order them over, and if anyone does have need for an SNS, it was really, really good to use. I mean, out of anything I'd used, it was so amazing, so easy, and much more discreet than anything else, which if you're going to use it would be quite good. So I used that for about 12 weeks, and I got some screened milk before my daughter was born, and I had it in our freezer because I just didn't want to worry. And I guess, again, looking back, it's that intuition, isn't it? It's like, you know, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
So I had done that, and then I think I did get donated some through Human Milk for Human Babies, but also at the time the North Canterbury Milk Bank was running, and so they had screened newborn milk in their freezer where the mums had all been blood screened, and I knew a woman who was helping to run it, and I knew one of the midwives that was involved with it, so they really helped me out and really had my back. And I think because they knew how important it was to me and what I went through the first time, that was a really amazing source of support.
That milk bank, is that the one that people sort of call the Rotary milk bank? Is that another?
Yeah, that was another one. It's since not working anymore, I guess. But the Rotary Milk Bank exists in Christchurch too. Sure. And the only difference is that milk from the Rotary Milk Bank is pasteurised, and they do use the NEC, the big official commercial pasteuriser. And so where milk through Human Milk for Human Babies is not, it's obviously just frozen. Wow. And you can choose to pasteurize it, so you can flash heat it, or but that again is kind of around your own level of comfort and your knowledge, and so I didn't do any of that. I didn't pasteurize or flash heat or anything.
Sure. And so so did you continue to be involved after your sort of, how long did you feed, firstly, how long did you continue to feed Cleo for after the supplementing? You still going, or?
I'm feeding her, yeah. So she is. So she's 2, and that feels more like success to me. But yeah, so I'm still feeding her now, which has been so special, and such a positive experience.
Nice. I remember with my first baby, I had such a hard time. It was a real battle, and I had all sorts of things going on, and I had a bit of the demure, so I never know how to say it properly, but it's called something like dysmorphic milk ejection reflex, and you get some pretty deep, awful feelings upon letdown. And I had these vasospasms, and anyway, this was my first. And I remember I had gone to work at the baby show all weekend, and we were working on the breastfeeding stand with a bunch of lactation consultants, league leaders, midwives, students, and I just had witnessed all these people feeding all weekend. And I remember going home, and my boy was about 16, between 15 and 17 months old. And I went home to feed him, and I actually cried because I realized for the first time in the whole journey, I was really looking forward to breastfeeding him. And it was such an amazing feeling to get to that place where I was like, this is actually wonderful. And then he just weaned by himself like really soon after that. It felt like we had come full circle. I was about 12 weeks pregnant by then with his brother. So I think that was part of the picture. But yeah, it was a really incredible thing, you know, to know all of the battles that we had gone through, but got to a place where it did. It felt good. It was a great journey, and I felt proud of us, and it felt so nice to have got to that point to feel good. And by the time they were at that age, you know, they were fully, you know, technically classed as fully breastfeeding, and it was the same as any other person who was breastfeeding and having solids and things, and it felt like an equalizer, if that makes sense. So I think what's really interesting, I guess, looking at the ups and downs and going through your journey, is the idea that you can simultaneously feel and acknowledge the sort of the grief and the loss at not being able to have the feeding journeys that you always thought that you would, but also understand and accept that that's how it needed to be. And people's reactions to that can be really different. And I know that sometimes people experience this sort of idea of like trying to dismiss or acknowledge or minimize people's experiences by saying things, you know, like it doesn't matter, or, you know, fed is best, it's all the same, those sorts of things. And I think for myself and for other people I've talked to, that's not necessarily a really helpful way of helping a person through their feelings. What do you think about that? Have you got any sort of advice or thoughts on the idea of sort of supporting a person through a process?
Yeah, I think it kind of comes back to what we touched on earlier, which was around just deeply listening to people and reflecting their own feelings back to them rather than making it about yourself. And that's not to say that your own journey isn't valid and potentially helpful for them. I think when you can empathize and say, yeah, you know, I had a really hard time too, and this is what happened for me, and I didn't expect any of that either. Because I think it was really interesting what you were saying last time we were speaking, and it was a way that I hadn't thought about it before in terms of the diversity of feeding journeys and celebrating, because there's so much diversity and there's so many different definitions of success. And I was reading something online the other night where one woman's definition of breastfeeding success was literally that she breastfed her baby once when he was born, and then he went to a bottle and he went to formula, because that was what was going to work for her family. And so for her, that was a huge success, and she hadn't done it with either of her two previous babies. And I just think, honouring that diversity and listening to people's stories really deeply. And if you don't know what to say, just reflecting back to them what they've said, and telling them that it's okay to feel however they feel, and knowing that people do, you know, move through it better if they feel heard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is a really good point around that sort of idea of what success looks like and what your intentions were, because we often talk about breastfeeding in a realm of successful or not successful, or exclusive or not exclusive, and we don't really have a good understanding of what people bring in with them in terms of their intentions, how long they ever intended to feed for, or how they intended to feed, whether it was, you know, exclusive or, like you said, whether it was just one feed. And it's all something that's important and something that's held by a person, and something that they've obviously you know, not always, but sometimes, you know, made a thoughtful and mindful decision about, and they've got reasons that sit behind that. And I think that's where some of the things that we had talked about, not necessarily as part of this clip, but around the importance of being able to make truly informed decisions and choices. And that I, for myself anyway, and from things that I've read, people feel you know, a much more higher levels of satisfaction if they feel that they've been an active participant in the decisions and the choices that have been made along the way. And that can really help when things don't feel like they've gone the way that you've hoped, because you know that those things and the way that you've been supported through the process, you've been able to make informed choices about the ways in which your journey went. And one of the things that I don't think that we necessarily do really well is providing people with a whole lot of different options when it comes to infant feeding, and especially when things don't follow the pathway that they might have intended. And I think the donor milk discussion is one of those areas that don't necessarily get discussed as an option. What has that been your experience? I mean, obviously that's something that you access, so you must have had a discussion or a thought process at some point. But what's your sort of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the use of donor milk is pretty fringy.
Mm.
And it didn't used to be, and obviously wet nursing used to be really normal, and so that's kind of a now thing. And I think I can't recall actually knowing much about donor milk before my own experience. I don't even really know if I ever thought about it. I did know about wet nursing, but as soon as my midwife let me know of that option, I immediately looked into it, and she had quite a bit of knowledge around it, and she was able to tell me about, you know, screening and blood screening and lifestyle screening and all of those kind of things. But then I did quite a lot of research of my own. But you know, when you do talk to other women and mothers, largely they either don't know about it or they are really uninformed, and there's a factor obviously which is pretty personal, and I think that is just a lack of kind of information or understanding as opposed to kind of anything real. But it surprises me how many women go to formula before looking at that option, or without ever looking at that option, or without ever being given that option, because of course they potentially, many women and families don't actually know about it.
Yeah, I'd say that's really fair, especially in the absence of sort of you know, a range of formal milk banks and things set up. I know that there's 2 in Christchurch, which I think we may have touched on earlier in this discussion. But yeah, in the absence of that, I guess it sort of happens in a formal way through the websites and different milk sharing platforms.
Yeah, but it's interesting because if you look at the statement of the New Zealand College of Midwives, it does include the fact that donor milk is, you know, the second best, personal definition of best, but best choice for infant feeding where mother's milk is not available or isn't adequate. And so,
I think that aligns with the World Health Organization statement as well.
That's right. And so it's kind of like, why is there no kind of public health campaigns on donor milk, and why are we talking about it more? If organizations like the WHO and College of Midwives are saying that that is their preferred second option, and I mean obviously that's grounded in a lot of evidence, it's not a random thing, and it's not to say that I think that people should use donor milk if they are uncomfortable with it. The place I come from really deeply is that people should be empowered to do what they want to do, and but I do think that needs to come also from a place of having all of the information.
Absolutely.
I think it's really hard for people to get all of the information.
And you've got such a good point there, because, and I think it's really great that your midwife was knowledgeable about the subject and could support you in that journey, where I know that there'll be a lot of people in the health profession who aren't knowledgeable about that, and that really speaks to their own, I guess, knowledge base, but also their own levels of comfort around certain things. And you know, that obviously plays quite a bit into the way in which people practice, and the ability for their clients or the people that they work with to make informed decisions. So it would be great to know that health professionals would, you know, doing more to have a good understanding of the availability of screened donor milk and what's happening out there on the fringes, as you say.
Well, yeah, and it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? It's like the more people use it, the more people will know, and the more normal it will become. Because there was a time when formula was, when they developed formula, when it was on prescription, and it wasn't a normal option, and it's just been normalized by society. And it depends where you want to go with this discussion, but arguably that's anti-women, because it's an industry, and women supporting other women and mothers helping feed other babies is kind of a community-based grassroots movement. Be a really beautiful thing. But so I suppose on some levels it comes down to your worldview as much as your personal choice.
The influence of patriarchy and all of that. It is it's such an interesting aspect of perspective in the whole infant feeding world.
But you don't even need to think about it like that. I mean, that's getting really kind of involved. I think the bottom line is just that people need to know all of their options and be able to investigate them themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then just go from there, and just make your decision on your gut feeling and what you personally want to do. And then you're sitting in a really, as you said, you are then making decisions which you will later define as being successful because you made them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you touched on the idea of making decisions based on your gut feeling as well, I think I've observed over the years, and I think really maybe reflecting on my own mother's parenthood journey as an older child, and watching how she mothered and parented us, and how that happened in her peer group. I feel like there is, to a certain extent, quite an erosion of that intuitive parenting, and people being able to trust that they can trust themselves, I guess, and their instincts to decide what may or may not be the right choices for them and their whānau and their children. It's something about, that could be a whole nother discussion, but I do think that we haven't necessarily continued to empower parents to trust their intuition and go with their gut feelings, and that can lead to a real reliance on the health system, and then a reliance on the opinions and the potential bias of the people who are providing care. And obviously open people to huge influence from commercial entities. Which again, it's a whole nother can of worms.
But I completely agree. And if you can empower anyone to look inside a bit more and follow their gut, because everyone has that quiet voice, right? And that is so, I don't know about you, but for me as a parent, that quiet voice is just the most valuable thing that I have.
I really like that quiet voice. That
little voice that doesn't leave you alone. Like, no, don't do that. Stop doing that, it's so valuable, and I think it does start from the moment that you meet your baby, or even in pregnancy, or and I think that it really can serve you well if you can, and it's kind of like a muscle. I find, like, the more you listen, the better it gets, and the faster that you react next time. And
that's so interesting. I think something that is important is that when you are pregnant, like going on those learning journeys, it can be the best time to look, to think and explore all the different ways in which things could go, and what that could and what your choices and thoughts would be about those things. Because I think during pregnancy we've sort of shifted into quite a prescribed model of care, where people have expectations, and they have expectations put upon them that they follow this prescribed journey. And then where throughout that pregnancy do you get those tools and hone your ability to listen to your intuition and understand how to research different things yourselves and inform your own perspectives. It's something that actually that needs to be supported and made as accessible as it can be for the really diverse population in Aotearoa. Yeah, so interesting. Is there anything else that you wanted to sort of add to this general discussion, or anything that you can think about, acknowledging that we've sort of done this in two parts, so it might be a bit hard to think about what we've covered and what we haven't, but yeah, is there anything that you wanted to touch on before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so. I think that's probably all that comes to mind. But yeah, I suppose just that intuition thing, and I really encourage any parent to really try and tune into that.
Do you know of any good resources or any books or websites that you found helpful, finding reliable information or helping you to think and learn about trusting your intuition?
I mean, the intuition one is probably more kind of natural parenting pages, peaceful parenting. And,
sure.
But I think that was one thing that we were going to talk about, was I think a really amazing resource for breastfeeding in particular is Kelly Mom.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's a US site, but it's really evidence-based, and you can go to the bottom of any of their articles and look through all of their referencing, and they're very balanced, and there's a lot of really great information there. There's a lot of information on donor milk, in terms of the safety issues and the 4 pillars of milk sharing, and then there's a lot of information on breastfeeding and supply issues, introducing solids, everything around feeding. I think it's probably the best resource that I've found, because you can find some pretty dodgy stuff on Google.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's awesome. We'll definitely point to that in the links of this video. Well, look, Kendall, thank you so much for being so open and sharing your breastfeeding journeys, and wish you heaps of luck with your ongoing endeavours. You're certainly a person with a lot of knowledge and important things to honour and offer. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Pleasure talking.
Thank you.